The Toyota Beams 3 SG is arguably one of the best four-cylinder engines. Now, it's not the best, but it is one of the best. Co-developed with Yamaha and Toyota, like all of Toyota's fantastic engines, these four cylinders make incredible power with incredible technology, and they're really, really cool. I ran them stock, tuned, ITBs, supercharged, and now we're going turbo. What makes these engines so good is they're a high compression engine, 11.5 to 1, plus they have full titanium valve train. So in their stock form or tuned, you can rev these to 8,300 RPM, no problem. And it's super great. They rev super fast, super quick. They're extremely responsive. You can make 200 horsepower without doing any forced induction, which is really cool. In something like an AE86, they're so great in like a rear-wheel drive platform because you get these out of a Toyota Altezza, and they come with a 6-speed manual transmission. Supercharged, my car made 250 wheel horsepower, 200 foot-pounds of torque. Now with the turbocharger, I'm hopefully going to be making a little bit more than that. The main reason why I'm switching is because, well, the supercharger died, it's broken, and I couldn't get a replacement. What we've got here is a turbo manifold from Surfab. Huge shout out to Simon and Surfab, he hooked me up with a great deal on this. And then a Garrett G30 660 turbocharger. Fortunately for me, I have this engine that's actually bad. It's got no compression on one cylinder, but I'm able to use this as a mock-up engine outside of the car, and then switch everything over to inside of the car and realize we have a couple of problems. So this video is mainly about mock-up and fitment. We got to get everything put together to see what we're going to need to change, what we need to modify. The thing about this manifold is it's from Surfab. They are on the other side of the world. They don't normally have left-hand drive cars, so I got to see if there's anything that I might need to tweak. It's just the reality of something like this, kind of a custom fitment thing. You know, I've got a relocated steering rack, I've got a left-hand drive car, I've got different engine mounts. There's gonna be some changes from car to car, but also the other things like the oil feed for the turbo, the oil return for the turbo, and kind of figuring out the exhaust, downpipe situation, and all the other little things that go along with being turbocharged. One of the tricky things here is going to be the oil drain for the turbo. Just the way the turbo manifold sits and this beautiful tubular design, it's really tricky to get a good drain out of it. So I fiddled with some of these. These are like a corrugated oil drain, and I actually just ordered some hardline. We might fiddle with some hardline and see if I can make a hardline fit better than these. The other thing too is that where the manifold places the turbo, it's pretty tight to the firewall. So right here, I've just got this straight 90 off the back of it. For the downpipe, I've got to modify a little bit because it's got to fit down there past the manifold, and then also try not to fry the brakes or anything like that. All right, so that downpipe is a 3.5 inch at the turbo, and then it converts to a 3 inch after that or at the elbow. And then I actually have to modify a little further and make it smaller because I need to put it, needs to go to a 2.5 inch, which is the rest of my exhaust. So things are a little tight in there, but I know I'm gonna have to modify some things, tweak some things to get it to exactly where I want it to be. Now looking at everything from the bottom, I hope you can see this well. You can see this is the downpipe up here, and it kind of interferes a bit. You can see that quite a bit better from this point of, you know, it can't quite clear the tubular header as well as the firewall and all that, which is fine. I'm gonna have to do some careful work on the tube to get it to fit down. I'm gonna have it come down on this side of the steering shaft. But one of the other issues is this flange right in here. That flange right there is for the external wastegate. And I think because Surfab is based out of New Zealand, they didn't have a car to lock things up with the steering shafts and everything. So that wastegate flange, unfortunately, is not perfectly positioned for having the steering shaft in the way. Like as you see here, I'm trying to set that in there, and the steering shaft is just too close, and this is too far down. I think I actually need to shorten it, probably a good 2 inches or so to have clearance to be able to get the wastegate in and clear the steering shaft. It just won't fit otherwise, unfortunately. And I think that's something that I can do. I can shorten that 2 inches. One of the other things I thought about is I could reclock it and change where it's positioned at. So that way, like cut it, there's some bends up in it. Oh my goodness, I hope you guys can see this. I thought about chopping it up higher and then moving it like to the right, you know, in this view to the right, you know, about 1.5 inches, and I can have the wastegate clear on that side and then have the dump tube come down over on this side. But I'm not really sure. We're gonna have to get this back out of the car and look at it and see what it looks like, I think, with it on the mock-up engine. Now that I've got the engine on the stand, I think that what I want to do is shorten the wastegate dump. I think I should be able to shorten this up to about here and re-weld the flange on over here, and I think that'll give me enough space for the wastegate to clear the steering shaft. I think anyway. Because not only is that going to pull it up higher, but it's also, you know, the steering shaft is here-ish. So that'll pull it up higher, as well as what it's going to do is it'll just rotate it a little bit in a little different direction in terms of like where the steering shaft comes through. But I think that that is going to be the best bet. One of the other options is going to be to chop. See, this is like an elbow right here. It's got a bend to it. So if I chop that in the middle, I could then also like rotate it and reclock it a little bit. So instead of it being positioned, you know, like right here, I could actually rotate it so it's further this way, or rotate it so it's further that way. And that is also something that's doable too. So I think I just need to weigh my options, decide what we're gonna do. The oil drain tube is kind of a big problem because you see the proximity of the drain here to the manifold. Originally, I wanted to run it that way through the runners and then down against the block, but there just isn't enough space to get through that way, unfortunately. So it's not gonna be possible to do it that way. There are ways that you can put it into like the head drain tube here, so I could do like a big loop out and around to there, but I don't think that's what I want to do. I think I want to put it to the oil pan. I think that's going to be a better option. Well, this is a lot of the difficult things, the wastegates setup and the oil drain are the two, I think, hardest things about this, aside from fabricating the downpipe and the intercooler piping and all that. There's other things like the oil pressure feed line. That's going to be something we have to sort out. That's going to be pretty straightforward. The intake and other things, and there's also boost control and some other stuff. Now, I went with the Garrett G3660 because I wanted something a little bit larger than the typical G25 660 that people go with on the beams. The G25 is great, it's really fast, really responsive. However, one of the things that people have theorized about the beams is the titanium valves in the manual engine tend to drop when you get high back pressure. Now that could be from heat, that could be from valve float. We don't really know. I suspect it's just the normal titanium valves that fail faster than stainless steel. That's a pretty normal thing. However, to help reduce back pressure as well as to help reduce the EGTs in the manifold, I've opted to go the slightly larger turbo, slightly more efficient, to G3660. It'll spool a little slower than the G25, but I think it'll still be plenty responsive for what I'm looking for, because I'm going to run probably a max of 10 PSI boost, probably more realistically around the 8 to 9 PSI mark. The wastegate is what controls your boost pressure, and the spring you choose is going to be what ends up being your max PSI, right? So if you put a 5 PSI spring in the wastegate, that means you're only going to hit a max of 5 PSI. However, something else that I have is a 3-port boost solenoid, and that should allow me to double that spring pressure, so I can vary anywhere from 5 PSI to 10 PSI, or 7 PSI if I've got a 7 PSI spring, up to 14 PSI. So I got this, it's funny, this is actually from Grimspeed. It's the same as pretty much every other 3-port boost solenoid, Mac valve, whatever. I used to be really into Subarus, and so when I started this build, I asked if anybody had one, and a friend sent me a Grimspeed one for free. So shout out to Rick. If you guys ever know about the OGs at Rally Sport Direct, Rick at Rally Sport, he and I go way back, and he hooked me up with that. So thank you so much, Rick. Now let's talk about the other things like the oil feed. This is a really straightforward thing on this turbo and this engine. The Garrett turbos come with a Dash 4AN fitting on them with their oil restrictor already, so you don't have to fiddle with trying to find the right restrictor size. Garrett takes that guesswork out of it for you. As far as where to feed the oil from, we're gonna do pretty much the same thing as like an oil pressure sensor, oil temperature sensor, any of that stuff. And that's gonna be down here near their oil filter. You can see right here, this is actually an aftermarket Autometer oil pressure sender. But we have 1, 2, 3 different galley plugs. And what we're gonna do is we're gonna use a threaded adapter to replace one of those galley plugs like this guy right here. And then I have a AN adapter on top of that. I'll put some links in the
description for what these are exactly, so you can buy these if you want to. But that's how we're gonna run it, is we're gonna go from this plug and then out and around. I really like PTFE hose. The hose ends are a lot easier to mess with because they use a ferrule kind of a thing set up. It makes it a lot easier than the typical AN line. So, and I like PTFE because it holds up better to things like ethanol, which I do plan to run on this engine. So here's one of those AN fittings I've added for that line. It's gonna attach right here. It's gonna go down and around. I think I'm gonna hug the block and come down and then end up down there at that galley plug. That should work out pretty well. There's some other turbos that are a little more affordable what people use from like companies like Pulsar, which is who makes this wastegate, and those are totally fine. I wanted something a little better, so I went with the Garrett. You know, this Pulsar supposedly makes a lot of theirs as like replicas of Garrett, and Garrett is somewhat local to me in Arizona. They do have some operations here. So I've got this Garrett G30. I'm pretty excited to see how it does compared to some of the Pulsars that other people have ran and see if this is a significant improvement. I would expect it is, because I'm hoping or expecting it's a higher quality turbo. Some other options that people have ran are like Borg Warners and some other things that are very similar size to this or the G25, and they're all great setups. A smaller turbo that's gonna max out. I mean, this is, Garrett rates this at 660 horsepower is what it should make up to, and I don't plan to make anywhere close to that. I've seen a lot of variants in dyno charts for turbos. We've seen, you know, some that are 250, 260 wheel horsepower, and then I've seen some that are upwards of 420 wheel horsepower, 415 wheel horsepower on ethanol, but still stock engine unopened. And so really what I want to do here is test the limitations of the stock engine before I do a built engine. So we'll run it with this G30 660. We're going to add some ethanol, we're going to add some boost control. You know, we're going to see where we can kind of cap things out at. Some of the things I worry about with the beams, aside from the titanium valves, is also the pistons and rods. They're not necessarily the most stout thing. They're not meant for a turbocharged application. They're not forged or semi-forged. So we're gonna see what ends up failing on this engine first, on the one on the drift car, if it's the valve train, if it's the bottom end, and we'll see what kind of horsepower we can make and what's gonna be reliable. And in the meantime, while I'm running that, hopefully for the next year or two, I'll build this engine, have a fully built engine, hopefully ready to drop in by the time the other one breaks. We'll see how that goes, you know, knock on wood. One of the other questions is, how well will the Beam's J160 6-speed manual transmission hold up? That's something that we really don't have the answer to. It's very similar to the 6-speed transmission on the S15. That one is actually based on this transmission that I have in my car. But the S15 crowd, or the Silvia crowd, seem to say, well, it doesn't hold up to as much horsepower as the 5-speed that comes in the other S chassis and other behind SR20. So we'll see, especially with a lightweight car like an AE86, I expect that the J160 should hold up no problem for quite a while, but honestly, I don't know. We're gonna have to test limits and see what happens. So the next video, we'll get all the stuff set up on this car that I talked about today. We're gonna see if we can get the wastegate sorted out, we'll get the oil drain sorted out, we'll make the oil feed line, and I think we'll also start working on the other fabrication stuff. But really that's the main thing, is getting all the oil feeds and the wastegates set up, and then we'll do the intercooler piping, and we'll do the downpipe and get that all squared away. And then after that, it's tuning and testing. So thank you for watching. Make sure to follow along, and see you next time.